everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk Advocacy to Me. Kicking off now, right on time today. Look at us. Amazing. I am Liz Richardson, and I have my co-host, Deena Zenyk, with me, as always. And we love Talk Advocacy to Me, where we talk about one question relevant to the customer marketing and advocacy space. And our esteemed guest today, and I say esteemed half jokingly because we've known Jon for so long. It's hard to stay esteemed, but we love Jon so much. But he is joining us today. This is Jon Erskine. He has spent 8 years, old man, in customer advocacy. Most recently with Influitive, who many of you on this call, I'm sure, know, maybe are even using, and he led their account management and growth function for a long time. You've also consulted with a lot of different companies or organizations in this space on defining customer marketing and advocacy. So, but more importantly, Jon has been a fireside chatter with me and Deena off and on throughout the years. So we are all thrilled to have you on here as our guest today, Jon.
Yeah. Excited to be here. I'm really excited to be here. And yes, we've had some incredible chats over coffees and beers at different conferences, and always on where the industry is headed and what do we think's next and what's that cool technology that's coming out. So I feel like this is long overdue, and I'm really excited to be here with both of you. So,
well, that is so true. We have been having these chats for a long time. So this seemed like an extra opportune moment to have one of these chats publicly about what is the future of customer advocacy in particular. Where is it going? Why is it where it is? And how do we get to the next level? So we have a spicy, we like the word spicy over here, a spicy topic. Today, the big honker question today is the death of destination advocacy programs near? And you know what, I'm going to even go a little off script because someone did say, like, I wasn't sure what destination advocacy program meant. So let's take a step back. Let's define it. I'm going to throw this to Deena because she's pretty good at defining things. Deena, what's your best definition of destination advocacy program?
Destination advocacy program is a program for card-carrying, flag waving customer advocates who join the program, and they're in there with their people in the program. That's my definition of a destination advocacy program. You go there to advocate.
Yep.
You go there to advocate.
You go there to advocate.
You want to add?
Yeah, I would say, it's that technology that brings your advocates into one space, right? And it's that one space that usually isn't controlled by the customer marketer or the customer advocacy manager or whoever else owns that relationship. But it's usually owned by a certain stakeholder within the organization that's reporting up through a department and is responsible for some sort of advocacy output, advocacy metrics at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just start then, like, the benefits. I mean, because we all had these.
Yep.
We all sold these.
We sold them. Yep.
We all consult on them. We Deena and I still help design launch them. So what's the benefit of destination advocacy programs to begin with? Because we don't want to act like there's no value there.
Yeah, I think the main benefit is access to your advocates, right? That was the point. It was, let's target the right ask to the right individual at the right time to drive some sort of business value or output. And it gave the customer marketer, the customer advocacy manager, that channel that they could control and they could own to essentially drive voice of the customer initiatives to whatever they wanted to.
I think you said the key word, control, right? Because we've been talking about different options for running advocacy programs for a long time. And one of the benefits of a destination advocacy program was just the amount of control you had.
That's right.
The amount of control around the environment, the brand, the content, the people around it. You can control everything, really. So that's pretty powerful if people are willing to come and meet you there.
And I think that right there is the challenge, right? Engagement. How do we find new advocates? How are we constantly engaging our existing advocates, right? And maintaining their attention on this program. And so when we talk about, is the death of destination advocacy programs near? I would argue that, we built these programs in a time where we really needed to drive as much attention we can, but we're competing for that customer's attention across multiple different channels. At the end of the day, it's not just your company's programs that's competing for that customer time, but it's everything else that they do in their lives. It's their smartphone, it's their kids, it's their email, it's this and that. And so I think one of the fundamental challenges of a destination program is you need the individual's time and attention to contribute. And so when we think about what the future looks like, I like to think that the future is something that's a little bit more ingrained in that customer experience, right? That's looking more at existing channels that organizations have. And I think, as technology matures and develops, we're getting to a point where there's more access to the customer through existing channels.
So let's do this. I want to do this. I'm going to throw this out to both of you. Just answer. Don't explain it all yet. Okay, we're going to get into it. Is the death of destination advocacy programs near? Jon?
Yes.
Deena?
100%, absolutely. Yep.
Whoa. Okay, so strong reactions here. So let's go. Let's have this. All right, so let's back up for the audience. And again, audience, if you have questions or you have an opinion, we do want to hear this. But why are we even wondering this? So what's the problem? Why are we even having this discussion? Why do we even think this?
I think I think that there is a level here still that needs to be defined, though, so we define destination advocacy program, but just so that when we're talking now about the death of destination programs, you could put something like a cab under the banner of a destination program. If there's a technology being used, you could put like a user group under that banner as well. So for me, when I'm thinking about the death of destination advocacy programs, I'm talking about scaled, like customer, like come one, come advocate type of programs.
I agree with you, Deena. I think you're still going to have targeted specialty programs for certain individuals, right? You might have, like you said, a cap. Your executive stakeholders are all, executive customers are all going away with other executives in your organization and brainstorming on your product or your service and where you're going. I don't think that's the end. I don't think it's the end of those. I think those specialty groups, maybe within Slack or existing communities, will still exist. But it's getting the scaled approach. It's one of those one-to-many, one-to-everyone programs into one single location where you're competing for their time. To me, that is what it's not scalable. The future isn't there. And I do think that, if we look at existing channels within certain organizations, the technology is there now to scale those, right? Whether it be in product, whether it be in existing communities, whether it be through emails, campaigns, or other campaigns that you have. I think there's a way for customer marketing, professionals in this space to leverage those channels, but still track who their advocates are and what they're contributing back to the organization, which is key, right? At the end of the day, we're all doing this to drive an outcome that leads to increased revenue or increased retention. And I think we need to always remember that.
Okay, that's a good segue. So while we move into this, we have a lot of listeners right now, which is awesome. So just yes or no to our audience. Do you think the death of destination advocacy programs, as defined to this point by this group, is near? So just feel free to drop it in there. No right or wrong answer. That's what we're here to debate today. All right. So let's take it back. And Jon, you just said the goal is to drive value. All right. So
that's right.
Aren't these programs driving value? I love playing the devil's advocate. That's just so fun.
Yep.
I get to I'm just throwing out questions today and making you guys answer the hard ones.
I'll say it's a small, if I can jump in, it's a small percentage of advocates in these programs who are driving real value.
Correct.
And the cost, the kind of hard cost of the software paired with the enormous cost of trying to drive engagement, trying to drive recruitment, you could maybe be better off just taking that time and that money and focusing on the people who really can drive value for your business and look at doing that in a different way. No doubt they drive value, but it's not the program that drives the value. It's the few people in the program that are driving the value for you, and you could probably get them to do that in another venue, not in the destination.
I agree. I think, working with Influitive and over the last 8 years and consulting with hundreds of different companies, you talk to different organizations that have different levels of maturity in their strategy. But one thing that was consistent that I never fully understood was everyone wanted to report on the number of advocates they have. They want to pass that up the chain. Oh, we have 100 advocates. We have 50 advocates. We have 500 advocates. And to me, that's a vanity metric, right? At the end of the day, how many people have done how many acts that have driven X amount of revenue over a certain time period is really what we need to be reporting up, right? And so if you're focusing your efforts on a very small subset of your customer base and you're putting 80% of your effort into like 5%, 10%, even less of your entire install base, to me, you're missing out on the bigger opportunity. And that's to drive engagement across a wider audience and a wider subset of your customers.
And part of our issue might be too, we like to talk about the holistic value of a customer. And even though we've been doing some wonderful things with that 5%, we have not done a super great job at looking at the value a customer drives and combining that with their monetary contribution to the company and saying, okay, here is holistically the value that this customer is bringing in. We aren't using measurements like that to say, like, look at the additional revenue and value brought in through the advocacy. We have like general metrics, but we're still not able or haven't figured out how to really tell the holistic story. Even with that segment. So maybe reporting there is a little bit of an issue. But like you said, Jon, we are putting in all this effort into this small amount, and we still seem to have a hard time like showing and proving, hey, look at all this value that we brought, which is crazy if you really think about it. What's holding us back?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's cross-functional buy-in. It's getting the right metrics reporting through your tools. In my opinion, the future of advocacy tools should really be focused on the outputs and measuring what people have done when in their customer journey and how that influences revenue. I don't think it needs to be a customer-facing engagement with points and badges. We'll get into gamification in a bit, but I think you can score that on the back end, right? And you can say, Liz is an amazing advocate. Look at all she's done throughout the customer journey and the customer life cycle. And that ties into her lifetime value as a customer. And so I think that's where the maturity of this practice needs to continue to develop with buy-in from the most senior stakeholders at your organization, right? And it's injecting those opportunities to advocate in the entire customer life cycle. And I'm talking for every customer you have, from onboarding all the way to mature customer. Where are those touch points? Where are you prompting them or asking them to do something, whether it be a voice of the customer initiative or otherwise?
Yeah. And you know what? This isn't even new, because like we always end up talking about B2C in here, right? And
totally.
And they run at such scale that they figured some of this out, right? They can say, oh, when we give this offer at this moment, after this interaction, we have a X% chance of seeing this type of growth, right? There's actual data behind that. And I think in B2B, that's hard for many different reasons, but we haven't got to that level of scientific strategy, I'll call it, where we can actually start measuring, oh, you know what? If we nurture at this point, we see that that interaction causes like a 50% increase by year, whatever. We don't really have that type of setup behind us. So is that because of tooling? Like, are our tools behind? Obviously, B2C can do it at massive scale, but they have they're dealing with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. They get the data in a different way. What is holding, what do we need?
Well, I think the B2B world's been primarily focused on their product that they're offering and engagement within the product, right? The company's looking at How often are they using the product that you're selling? How often are they engaging in that product? What's your usage rate? What's your adoption rate? What's your churn rate? Right? These are all metrics that, customer success teams track. I do think as customer success practice becomes more mature and develops, they're tracking more and more of those stages along the customer experience that may not be just in product. And it might be around, is this person engaging with their CSM? Does this person have a high NPS score? Is this individual attending our conference? So it's looking at those touch points along the customer experience that may not be just in product, but then aligning to those as to when we can ask them for an active advocacy. And so I believe that as customer marketing gets closer to customer success and those two organizations mature, there's a large opportunity to inject advocacy into that customer journey at different stages and build out those campaigns that are really going to make an effort at a scalable level, right? That's touching everybody.
Yeah. And Jon and I have talked about this idea of, Deena and I have done a lot of work building campaigns, right? Where you take a point in time and you drive an outcome in a limited time fashion. And they are effective. They do work, and there is a time and place for that. However, I think for advocacy professionals, we've done a lot of leaning into these point in time, like build it, run it, build it, run it, or constant needing to be fed everyday engagement and interaction. So either we're like just constantly engaging, trying to engage, but what's missing is how other parts of the organization mature, which is process and scale. And then where you build something once to some degree, of course, you're always going to iterate, but then you can run that program and see the effects as everybody who it's relevant to touches, and you see those outcomes. So you're scaling not only your reach to that customer base, but you're scaling you and your efforts. Deena, I see you shaking your head like you're tracking with that.
I totally am. I'm actually, what popped into my head, I'm sure that you've heard this, Jon, maybe you've heard this, like, I love Air Canada, but for the last 15 years, I've kind of harshed on them as well from a customer advocacy perspective, because I've always said, they don't know who I am. They don't really care who I am. I'm in their loyalty program. I can get a better seat and check a free bag. But wait, just a couple of weeks ago, this changed. So they have, I was thinking, yes, we always are we can learn from B to C. But I think that B2C is also now taking the learnings of 15 years of customer advocacy best practice and starting to infuse that into their loyalty programs, because Air Canada sent me a limited time promo code for my birthday. They know who I am. They know who I am, people. They've got my data. They know it's my birthday. They still don't care when I show up at the gate, but that's okay. So the learnings are going that way. The B2C learnings coming back into the business, I think, is part of the key of how we tell that value story. That for me, that's kind of that's my bugbear right now, is the value story and the decisions that we make around is the death of destination advocacy programs near. I think the nail in the coffin of destination advocacy programs comes back to the value story and not being able to clearly articulate what the value is for how much time, effort, and money it takes to run these programs. That's kind of the internal side. And then the external side, getting customers to log in and come hang out with their fellow advocates.
So let me ask you this, Deena, because you bring up the Air Canada example, right? What was your motivating factor there? Was it the fact they recognized who you were on your birthday and made that a special moment for you? Or was it that you earned 1,000 points on your last flight?
Oh, yeah, I earn points all the time. I've got the credit cards. I'm all about the points with Air Canada. I get a huge amount of monetary value from the program, but I've always thought they have there's no aspect of this program that is really about me, the person. So my birthday was a couple of weeks ago. So it was getting that birthday email from them was I know this is totally at scale.
But I know where Jon is going with it, in the sense of I fly Delta, if we're going to keep going with airlines here. Happy for all of you to shout out online who your favorite B2C loyalty program is. But I fly Delta because the hub is in Atlanta and I live in Birmingham. So the nearest major hub is Atlanta. It's a convenience thing. So I'm going to put all my points into Delta because that's the best flights I can get with the least layovers and all that kind of stuff. So honestly, it doesn't matter what Delta does to some extent. I'm here for the points. Like I am literally here for the points. I know they don't know who I am. I know they don't really care about who I am, but this is convenience. Now, if they add on something where it's like, hey, I love when they do those little shout outs when you're on the flight, they'll be like, hey, just want to shout out to like so-and-so who's doing their 1000th flight with Delta. That is like the sugar on top that then starts to create a little bit of emotional connection. But at the end of the day, the first step is I need to know exactly the value that I'm getting out of this program. And for me, the value is I'm going to get free flights for me and my family to go where we need to go. And I think that might be some of our challenge with destination advocacy programs as well, is the value proposition of these programs. While heartwarming, many of them are heartwarming, and I want to be part of a community, but like, let's be honest, how many communities can I be a part of? I literally am in this space and I can't even keep up with the very few amount of communities that exist here, on top of vendor communities and learning best practices for all the vendors that I'm using, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lot to ask. And then I need to know very clearly what the result of my efforts is going to be. And I think often it is, we'll talk about points and rewards, which at least, Jon, are very clear to some degree. I know what I'm thinking. It's either, or it's going to be connection. Connection is really important. And we've always said advocacy was built on connection. And there is some really great fruit that comes out of that. It's not extremely scalable. Okay. So that's part of that. And then it's like access and whatever. And we all know that with advocacy programs, some people get the access, some people don't. It really just depends who your brand is and how in need they are and what use cases you meet. So the value proposition of these programs may not be high enough to garner the type of engagement that's why we're constantly chasing.
I think there's incredible value there for the few. If you, even in a massively scaled, like 20,000 person advocacy program, there's a huge amount of value there for the few. I'm thinking of Cisco and the people that like you see at the conferences, and their pictures are here, there, and everywhere, and so are their stories. They're getting a massive amount of value for themselves, for their careers, their network out of being in the program. But it's just like a fraction, just that tip of the iceberg. And the real value that the rest of the folks get, not speaking of Cisco now, but the real value that most folks get out of an advocacy program just doesn't correlate directly to the value proposition that's put out there.
But I think there's ways to still provide that recognition, right? It's you're talking about, you use Cisco as an example, and the how their advocates are able to kind of build their careers off what they've done. And I would argue it's not the program, it's how they're leveraging and they're promoting those individuals at their events through their other channels, right? The program isn't facilitating that. And so I do think it's really important that you're still scoring your advocates on the back end. You're still tracking who's done what over the last year and who your top advocates are. And you're still recognizing them, and you're still providing them those opportunities and working cross-functionally to elevate them and support them through different channels that your team's running, whether it be your events or your webinars, your online content, or whatever else it might be.
But Jon, scoring is so hard.
What's that?
Scoring your advocates is so hard.
I don't think anyone's nailed that yet.
No.
And I think that's a huge opportunity in the market. But if we can do it, if programs like Influitive or Base or others can say, you've earned X amount of points, why can't we just do that on the back end? Right. And I know there's a few clients that I worked with that were very forward thinking in this element, where it's, okay, we're not going to dangle a point and a badge in front of someone, where it's, getting away from that give-get relationship around advocacy, but we're going to measure it, and we're going to understand when everyone does something that has an impact, and we're going to recognize it through moments that matter. Right. And I think
but Jon, I really liked my $1,000 plus Disney gift cards from Influitive.
Liz, that was the good old days.
Was that the good old days, or when was that?
I think about that a lot, because I think like, well, it worked on me, and I took a million reference calls. I did, and I think I made the company plenty of value back off of that. What I would say is eventually, yeah, you saw those rewards like scaling back and scaling back and scaling back, because I think here's the thing.
And now they're gone.
In a lot of destination advocacy programs, like, people are getting rewarded. We've seen it. We've been in programs where you're racking up a ton of point value for what though? And it is like for doing activities, for commenting on a forum post, whatever it might be. Whereas, like, you know what? I think I kind of earned the Disney World gift cards, right? And I made the money back for the organization. But when you're trying to do that at scale without kind of discretion, you're trying to just drive engagement for the sake of engagement, then yeah, what you have is these big unwieldy programs that cost a lot of money. And then you only have like 10 Liz's, right? And then you're basing all the value of your program off the 10 Liz's, and then some like broad scale, maybe surveying feedback, whatever it might be. That's hard to put a value against. And I think what we're saying here, if I move this on just a little bit, is like a lot of that interaction, that activity, that engagement, that moment of delight, all of that can be built out on scale without, to Jon's point, where this like give get kind of thing, but more it's more about, oh, this happened in my journey, this is the engagement I got. This happened in my journey, this is the engagement I got.
Data driven, point driven advocacy asks, right?
Yeah.
My argument is you should still get that Disney gift card, right? You should still, I'm not saying you shouldn't. What I'm saying is the organization should know that you love Disney, and they should recognize how many acts of advocacy you've done, and they should be giving you that gift card and creating a very magical moment for you in your customer experience. And I think that's the difference, right? We're not dangling. We're not saying, hey, we'll give you this $1,000 gift card. It's, thank you, Liz, for all you've done for us, right? And through that interaction, which is, coordinated with customer success, you've now increased your chance of renewal for that customer. At the end of the day, you want to influence net dollar retention, right? And so by doing a program like that, you're increasing the likelihood, and you could track against that influence in terms of influenced revenue within your program.
So I think what we're saying, I mean, because we grew up in this field. The premise of advocacy is that you build relationship to the point where someone's personal brand is tied to the organization's personal brand. And so, I did enough with the company that like you become almost part of that. And that is not going away. Like, those customers are so valuable. What I think happened is we started creating programs that mixed kind of just any value, all value into one, and then the weightiness of the program became too much.
We got greedy.
Yeah, we wanted them to do everything.
We got greedy, and then it was like all advocacy is good advocacy. You want to come in and just do like a bunch of junk and leave some kind of like half-baked responses in a platform, like, we'll take it. All advocacy was good advocacy. And I think what you're saying, Liz, is we're moving beyond that, but also swinging back to, like, true advocacy has a place inside the business, and real advocates deliver real solid value to the business. And it's like a ball game. We have to be there ready to throw, and we also have to be there ready to catch with the right people at the right time.
Yeah. Is it this, Jon? So right now we have kind of like we just, like, if you imagine fishing, like, we have a big net, and we just kind of bring everyone in, and then we just start sorting through the fish, right? Like, we try to do activities, we try to do engagement, and we try to find like the red fish in a sea of silverfish. We're trying to find these red fish. Instead, the goal would be like, have your fish swimming along. Like, don't trap them and keep them here and then try to corral them. Like, have your fish swimming along, and then have those touch points, have those data points where, like, oh yeah, you just pull them out because even something as simple as gift giving, which we talk a ton about. I haven't been in a program that has learned what I, Liz, like without human intervention to offer me rewards that I find reasonable or that I find compelling. So, what do you know about Liz? Okay, so do I want services? Do I want Spotlight? Do I want the Disney gift card? Like, what do I want? And I don't think we're using our listening and data and all that to actually surface these programs to make the interactions more valuable, more compelling, and stronger. We're just kind of putting all the options in front of everybody a lot of the time, and then hoping people will find their path instead of helping them find the path.
So I would argue that data exists in most organizations. I think, most customer calls are recorded now in the B2B world where those insights are somewhere. I think, there's tooling now that can understand the individuals. AI is going to play a factor in the future of this industry in terms of how much we know about a certain individual or not. I would also argue that, some of those insights fall on the responsibility of your account management and your customer success teams, the people that are spending a lot of time with those customers and getting to know who they are, right? Is your organization tracking these personal insights about those individuals? And how is your organization going to leverage that and be able to capitalize on creating an experience that matters to those individuals? And to me, that's the future of the role of a customer marketer, is going to be the person that takes the data that we learn and then builds their campaigns based on that data that they have access to. Now, this problem gets harder as you go up market, right? You become an enterprise. Like I think we like to think of programs at a small organization versus an enterprise, and it can be a very different beast. But I think the data is still there. And I think it just depends on the scale of that data and how much support you have to mine and access that data so that you can create these targeted campaigns.
Yeah.
Liz, I would argue you got to know all the fish in the, right?
Yeah,
You said, right? Going back to your fish analogy, you got to know all the fish that are swimming, and you got to handpick the ones that are going.
You can catch the fish as they're swimming, or you can try to corral. And I just kind of got goosebumps because I'm like, yeah, that's it. It's like, the advocacy destination programs, like, they are easier to wrap your mind around. I know what I can do. I know what I'm fashioning. I know the experience. I have this little group of people. It's easy to wrap our heads around and control. And again, just for all you people freaking out on the phone, I see some of those comments. We're not saying those are all going to go away. Like, lots of value for very relevant, personalized, high touch engagements for those Liz's and Deenas out there who are going to be, taking 10 reference calls for you. But there's this future where, you said it, the customer marketing role becomes more about, how do I orchestrate alongside the data and the journey that already exists? I'm not trying to create a controlled environment. That's a little piece of my job, but a big piece of my job now is, how do I fish along? Like, how do I find and then fish? And in a way that it's like, they want to come along that path, and I'm finding just the right time to engage with them. I'm using that data, and I know it's scary. Like, from someone who comes from a more traditional marketing background, or someone who didn't take data science, or someone who hasn't been in all of those data mining and analyzing tools. Like, it is hard because marketing doesn't traditionally sit there. And so we're asking people to become familiar with processes that are really outside of their comfort zone. So I love, though, that future. It's like, guys, Deena and I said this in London at the CMA event. It's time to think bigger. Why settle for this when you could be playing across the entire customer base? Deena, you wanted to add to that, I can see.
Oh, I was just thinking about, this as all kind of part of our evolution, and like the revolution that customer advocacy brought to businesses and to sales and marketing in particular. The idea of, like, a join this type of advocacy program, like, it still will appeal to a certain type of person. It still plays a role. But it is like, when we were in London, Liz, like we said, it's like the reign of these programs as like your one-stop shop, one-trick pony type of approach.
Right.
We have to move beyond that if we're going to crack the code on communicating the value back to the business. We have to be thinking about the full scope and portfolio of initiatives, efforts, and programs that drive value from customers back into the business and business out to customers.
Deena, I would argue it also depends on the maturity of your organization and what type of tooling and solutions you have access to, right? If you're a 100-person company, 200-person company, you don't have a robust community. You don't have Pendo walk me prompts in your product or anything like that. Maybe a destination advocacy program is something that will help you get the job done in the short term.
Totally.
But what I've seen is companies grow from that 100-person into the 500, into the 1,000-person company, and they eventually outgrow that, right? And so as your cross-functional tooling becomes more, more robust and more sophisticated, right, that's where you can start to bring in and embed it more in the journey. And that's one of the things we were working on at Influitive, right? We wanted to bring our challenges into other communities, Chorus and Salesforce, and right on that notion of, making the ask through a different channel that your customer already engages in. Right. And I still think that's the future. I still think that, if you can make those advocacy asks, we're still going to need to drive a review campaign on a pinch or find a speaker in a pinch. Right. But if you have access to that tooling that can help you access the customer, then you can start to weave and create these campaigns that will drive scalable results in terms of what you're trying to do.
And I think that's what's important is we need to be able to get to the point where we're building campaigns that we can run over time and people walk through so we can actually learn what is working and what is not working. If it's constantly just add engagement, one-off campaigns, it's very hard to, have real data behind what works and what doesn't work. And so I think it's exciting. And we might even find that this creates different roles in the team because it is a lot to ask someone to be a major relationship builder. And oh, by the way, we also need you to understand the basics of data, and we need you to be like a campaign planner across the customer lifecycle. It's a lot.
It's a lot
for one person, but I think it's really exciting as well to think about like, okay, this isn't like, I think people are a little frustrated maybe in this space, just a little bit to some degree, like, why is my budget getting cut? Why are my people getting cut? Why do I never get headcount? All my tools are getting thrown away or acquired or whatever it might be. But like where we can play a much bigger role, this might be the answer. It's like we just have hit a wall. We need to start thinking a whole lot bigger.
And there's no one better positioned inside the business to do it than the person who has been at the helm of that destination advocacy program. Like
100%.
You hold the keys to really push through this barrier, this plateau for your business and show a huge amount of value to your customers and from your customers. It's right there. It's just figuring out the tooling and the pathway, the right time, the right place.
And remember, I would add that your counterparts and your colleagues across sales and CS and other teams, they all have the same goal in mind, right? Again, let's tie it back to the goal. It's new logo acquisition, new revenue, or retaining that dollar retention or upsell and cross-sell of existing revenue, right? And so I would encourage everyone on that call to remember that and always be tying your campaigns back to those metrics. And if you need cross-functional support, tie it back to retention, tie it back to new logo growth, right? And why you're doing this. And I think if you're always tying it back to those metrics, you will always get buy-in and you will get that headcount, right? But it's hard to be able to connect those dots sometimes. And I think that's where your programming and your internal tracking of advocacy needs to connect those dots.
Okay, we have to wrap. And thanks to everyone live, like more than half of you who stuck it through. So you guys are awesome. Great conversation. I'm sure Jon will come through, and as will we, and read these comments and have some response. There was just so much, you guys, I didn't know what to focus on. So I was like, I'm going to let those comments ride for now. But I would just say this because it's exciting, but it is overwhelming, and there's a lot of new tooling to think about, and there's a lot of new tools even come into our space, and which ones should we be using and what are the right ones? A lot of questions. But I would just say, having been at the forefront of this 10 years ago, we all were, the three of us, we were all there, and it was such an exciting time. Like that was such an exciting time. And I think that's how we need to look at this time today too. It's like, okay, now here we are. We're at the frontier again. We got comfortable. We built our little saloons in cities and whatnot, and we were happy and we were congratulating ourselves. And then it's like, now we know we need to forge forward. And so who among this community will be the ones to take this to the next level? And that's always exciting to find out and see. So, if you have a passion for it, it's kind of like your time to shine.
I think it's a really exciting time for this space. I really do. I think the technology is there now, and it's just we got to put the pieces together. So
yeah. Okay, Jon. Knew it would be a fantastic conversation. Always could shoot the breeze for you for a million. Jon, by the way, if anyone is ever in town with Jon, he is like super fun to go have a drink with.
So fun.
All right. So, all right. So if you're not following him yet, definitely go follow him. If you want to get more of his opinions, go LinkedIn him. I'm sure he will respond to you. But Jon, thank you so much for coming. It was so fun.
Thanks. Liz. Thanks, Deena.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.